So now the big question, I get a lot of flack because I talk about it. I do these red teaming interviews and these like hacking interviews. And then all the blue team guys are like, David, what about stopping this nonsense? So what's your advice? How do people on the good side stop this? Because you're doing this penetration testing to help a company improve their security. So what advice would you give them if like someone like 40% of people, give you their credentials? What's the next step? So what do you advise the company?
For the organization to do?
Yeah. So like now you've proven that you can get through their security defenses, and a lot of people are falling for this. Do you just give them the report and say, you're in trouble now? Or do you like say, okay, well, this is what I suggest you teach you? Do they go for training? What's the next step?
Yeah, of course. We always work with organizations through mitigations and remediations past this stuff. For organizations that are susceptible to phishing, obviously multi-factor authentication on everything is our first suggestion, because really you can phish a user, and if that single set of credentials isn't helpful, you can't move any further, right? Because there are plenty of instances that we see where you can get a username password pair and you can't access anything because they have like fully protected all of their authentication points.
So the best deterrent, or the best thing to do as a minimum is two-factor authentication. Is that right?
Yes, and we also see that done poorly. Just recently with, I can't remember, it was like a group of 16-year-old kids that had gotten into Microsoft. I forget the name of their group, but they had done something called MFA bombing, which is, so we see MFA implemented poorly as well. Like when users get a text message and it says, click this text message or click this push notification to allow access to your system. And if someone is already on their computer, they'll think, that's for me. Or if it happens at 3 a.m. 100 times in succession, then of course, they want to stop receiving that notification. So implementing MFA and then implementing it appropriately too. Google's MFA is one of the best implementations that I've ever seen. If you attempt to log into a Google account, it'll tell you, go into this specific app on your trusted device and then enter the code that you see on this computer. So there is no way getting out of that other than like social engineering, maybe calling a user, which, is a great deterrent.
Any other advice? Because I think I'm glad you used the Google example, because I find that it's the problem is it's frustrating, and then people turn it off or try and circumvent it because, I might not have the device with me, or I'm traveling and all this kind of stuff. What's your advice to organizations to convince the users to do this?
Just forcing them. I feel like that's the only response, especially internally, because, being an employee, you do have a responsibility to help secure your organization. And if that means it will take you an additional 30 seconds to log in, then unfortunately, that's just the pathway that has to happen.
So have you got any war stories? I mean, obviously don't tell us names, but have you got like any crazy war stories of things that you've done?
I do have war stories, more so on the physical pen testing side, because, when you're sitting behind a keyboard doing phishing, it's not as exciting.
So I think we need to get you back for physical pen testing. I don't know if that's very hard to demo, but hopefully you can give us some B-roll for another video. But give us some examples just to whet the appetite. Give us some crazy examples of physical pen testing that you've done.
Yes. So physical pen testing, the only time that I was ever caught, I would say, I was working for an organization that was a super, super secure industry. So I had identified an employee that was working at a location I was trying to access through LinkedIn. And I saw that he had only been working there for like 6 months or so. So I thought he probably doesn't have a great idea of the practices that they use in terms of letting visitors come in. And I spoofed their director of physical security's phone number. And I called him. I called his personal cell phone that I had found just through open source intelligence. I spoofed her phone number and I was like, hey, this is me, the director of physical security, and I have a vendor that's performing a physical access control review within half an hour. She's going to come on site. Can you please let her in? He was like, of course, I'll let her in. So then this was actually across the country from where I live. So I had just flown into there that morning. And then I called him. I got on site. He let me in and he was like, you can go anywhere you want besides the server room. And of course, being a physical pen tester, that is really the only place that I want to go. I don't care about your bathroom or whatever. From the perspective of an auditor, I was saying, I really need to access the server room. That's the final part of this process. And so he let me in there, did what I do. And then as I was walking out, 2 people came up to me and they were swearing. They were like, who is this person? Why did you let them in here? And he was like, don't worry, it's not a breach. That was when I cut it, because they were just so upset, so visibly upset. I was like, I finished my review. I'm going to go ahead and head out of here. Thank you so much for all of your help. And then as I was leaving, their CISO had called me and he was like, please tell me that was you, Cori.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, they obviously paid you to do the test. And they were obviously very relieved that it was you at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. No, that was it. So that was a close call. And actually, they said that was the first breach that they had ever had at that location, even in terms of physical pen testing. So.
And the poor guy lost his job. I'm not just kidding. I don't know. Hopefully it was all right.
I hope so.